I mean, you're right. We are going to give Patrice as much time as he necessarily needs. There's not a you can look at Plan B and C and such, but let's be honest, you don't replace that type of player and what he means to our organization. That might take years to replace that player in that sense. So, we do have to give him, all the latitude in the world to make what the best decision for he and his family, and we'll do that. He's given us, indication that he's not going to hold us up in that sense in terms of what we may have to do subsequent to him making a decision. But to be perfectly honest, I don't think there's a timetable on it.
How would you go about replacing Bergeron? You need a first line center.
Yeah, again, it might be years in the making in terms of, you draft a player like that and develop a player like that, and you count your blessings every day. That's ultimately what it comes down to. To be perfectly honest, that's how it generally happens for most organizations. And when you have an iconic player, a player that's going to, enter the Hall of Fame, that's generally how it transpires. And it'll be no different probably for the Boston Bruins to find the next, type. I don't know whether or not there'll be another one.
Whether Bergie decides to keep going or not, would center be somewhere you could maybe looking trade free agency, just given the situation you have right now?
Well, I mean, let's acknowledge that we're not playing and we're disappointed in ultimately how we performed, throughout the series. Good pockets to it, and I'm sure we can get into more of the nuances. But I mean, ultimately, we're disappointed we're not playing. So we have to look internally first and foremost at areas that we need to improve. That very likely falls on me with player personnel and or whether or not we're going to implement internally and whether we develop properly. So all those things have to be evaluated. And they will be, and we're in that process already. And then going back to the coaches and how do we, Bruce spoke about it yesterday, how do we continue to make the necessary tweaks, implementing the personnel that we have brought in. I think we did a pretty good job last year of attacking some of the areas. We had a lot of players that have left the organization in the last 3 years that have been big parts. You're talking about Z, you're talking about Tug, you're talking about Kretsch, you're talking about players that have been here and won and helped us win. So replacing those players and implementing those players, I think you saw a little of that in the first part of this season. Where we had some new faces and people were feeling out where they were going to fit in, and Bruce and the staff figuring out what impacts they were going to make. And then you look at the team in January, February, and March, and that's the team we had envisioned and played very well. And did we play our best in a Game 7 or throughout the Carolina series? No, I don't think we did. And my message was I believe we've left something on the table this year. In terms of what we needed to accomplish, what our ultimate goals to accomplish.
You've spoken to Kretsch's people about possibly coming back?
Not recently. David Pasternak, along with Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark, have all traveled over to the World Championships and play. Knowing how close they are, I'm sure there'll be a conversation. Maybe it filters back to me. I certainly kept in touch with David and his camp throughout the year, and he had hard decisions to make in terms of the promise he had made to his family, overall, and. Just ultimately decide to stay and see it through. I'm sure that at some point in time, if he decides he wants to return, that hopefully I get a call and we can have a conversation. But I have not gone down that path for several months.
Would that be a path you pursue?
Yeah, again, has to line up for a number of reasons. It still looks like he values playing the game and being highly competitive and was very productive. Seamlessly would probably fall back into knowing what our team is like and what we're trying to accomplish. But again, it's hypothetical for me at this point in time. So I'll cross that bridge when it's presented.
You obviously have a lot of contracts on cap space. How active do you think you can be this offseason?
I guess it depends on, you're talking about free agency, you're talking about trades, you're talking, I think all the above, to be perfectly honest there as well. I think I have to peel back the onion a little bit and see what changes we can make and want to make. We're going to go through, a little more deeper dive with our coaches and our player personnel staff and look at, again, internally, what are our options, versus, going to the trade market and exploring some of the opportunities that may present, between now and really, September and October.
What is your sense, Don, that you couldn't get to the full potential threshold in round one?
Again, we knew this going in and breaking down the series in pre-scouting. You're talking about teams that finished 1 and 2, expected goal-wise during the course of the season. 2 very, very, defensively oriented teams that were going to be stingy. It was going to come down to, the execution piece, which, give them credit. They executed just a little bit more than we did at certain times in crucial games, in situations. Discipline, we took too many penalties in the series. Takes away, it's not just that we might have on the surface, won a power play, where our power play percentage is a little better and penalty killing wise. They were a very good penalty killing team all year as well. So we knew that was going to be a challenge. That being said, it takes away momentum of your own 5-on-5 play when it takes a lot of energy to have to kill those extra couple minors here and there. And that's on us for, some of those situations. And then getting to the 5-on-5 in the areas of the ice, they used the up top really well. Their D found some seams that generally don't happen in our system. So shame on us for the breakdowns overall. And we didn't execute the same degree. Whether that's the tips or whether that's a key, moment of games that I talk about being able to elevate and finish a 2-on-1 versus not. And because those are not, they're just not a lot of trade chance opportunities in the course of the games. And the way the games played out, when you got a lead, it was difficult to come back. And I think 6 of those games, it spells exactly that way. Game 7, the margins are even smaller. You're entering the series knowing the margins are smaller. And in Game 7, they probably get even smaller. And really, the opportunities just weren't there. They executed just a little bit better than we did, which I describe it that I think we left something on the table.
No, just as with David Pastrnak, is want to stay here long term. In the sense that he feels that way. We had,
Just a general conversation, and exit-wise in terms of having the opportunity at the earliest possible time allowable for us to have a conversation with his camp, and he knows that there's a mutual respect from David and me and his camp, and we'll dive right into it at the earliest possible time that we're allowed to, and get that indication. It's never been an indication otherwise that this is where he wants to play, wants to win. He's obviously a great player, an important player for us, and we'll attack it like we have done with all the other players that we feel the same way.
Off-season repairs for anybody?
Yeah, a little longer list. Obviously, Grzelcyk is definitively going under for shoulder surgery. We've got a few other players that's some follow-up. Probably the bigger surprise is Marsh is going to have an evaluation hip-wise, so I think he's got some tests to go out. We've got several other players that are doing some MRIs. I don't think there's any other surgeries that are imminent, but stay tuned in case we have some updates. Like I said, I think we've got some follow-up to making sure the imaging comes back how they see it from a standpoint of time and healing as opposed to something that may have to be more proactive. But Marsh was, in disclosure, Marsh was probably the one that was a little more surprising of having some adductor issues in the last couple of years and then just doing a little more. He's doing more exploratory stuff now to confirm that. But again, I didn't want to have anybody caught off guard. If we go down that, we'll certainly announce.
Would that be a significant one?
I'm not getting ahead of myself. It wasn't on the radar when other people have spoken, so I certainly felt it was our due diligence to disclose what, rather than it being a surprise down the road. And I will cross that bridge when it does come, but I think, as of today, and you asked the question, I think it's fair for me to answer that.
What's kind of the forecast for maybe a guy like myself for next year, just kind of thinking ahead? Has there been any organizational discussion about moving him to center at some point to get a look at that potentially, or do you want to keep him on the way?
We have not had, discussions internally about him definitively playing center. We do think he has attributes, but at this stage, we are focused on him, his overall growth and development. I think this year was a really good building block year for Fabian in a lot of ways, to be challenged, to be pushed, and see him respond. Now we'll go through the steps. You've got an odd timing of the potential of World Juniors coming up in August, and we'll go through that process. He's gone home now to get acclimated. We have, our staff that's going to reach out to him to build in what his training regimen and where he's going to be. Probably comes back a little earlier, but again, the August situation, and if he's asked, and then we have to evaluate, as all teams will, players go into that environment. It's hard to hold players back of that nature and that opportunity. So we'll cross that bridge when it comes. But we haven't definitively thought about him at center right now. We think that his offensive upside and scoring potential and creative mindset, both on the power play and 5-on-5, he's being served well right where he is, and not necessarily force feeding, where a center, has to play 200 feet all the time and play against bigger, stronger guys all the time. It's a lot on their guys' plate. So I think he's better served where he is right now.
The Virtue Love, did he suffer a significant injury?
No, not significant. He got dinged up in one of the playoff games and, wasn't able to play, but he's fine. He'll be fine. He'll have a summer that we have to map out for him as well, from a training regiment and being around, acclimating, was a good indoctrination of, leaving school, getting in the pro lifestyle, to tell you the truth. And now we're gonna be on top of what his training regimen is, and he's got a great creative skill set that we're excited about, and we believe we can teach him some of the other areas of the game.
How much pressure do you just maybe bring on yourself or feel on yourself as the GM when it's a first round exit, with this team where obviously the expectations are, to go deep into the playoffs and win the cup? Just how much do you sort of feel that after a first round loss?
I think I've been around this town long enough for people to know in terms of pressure and what I'm necessarily going to lump on myself and hold myself, hopefully, to the standard that why I'm in this job, what the Jacobs family, the organization, the history of the Boston Bruins, the standard that we're being held to is exactly what I aspire to. And again, to be perfectly clear and honest, it's the aspiration to be the best in class, on and off the ice. And when we're not, we want to hear about it. The criticisms are what they are. Nobody likes to hear them. Everybody calls it constructive criticism. I don't necessarily, everybody feels it's constructive, but it's appropriate. And you need to hear them. You need to have evaluations. You need to look in the mirror and figure out what that guy's staring back at you to tell you. So that's a big part of my makeup, but I think it aligns with what we try and accomplish, what we have tried to accomplish. Why, I stand up here and say, if I can put the best team together, Patrice wants to continue to play. That's the mindset that we aspire to uphold. And winning is part of that, absolutely part of that. And what we've tried to do over the course of, since I've come back on as part of not playing the game, is have that exact. Have we accomplished it all the time? No. Acknowledgement, this league is hard. It's hard to win 50 games in a season. But you just don't hang your hat on it. You got to go through, and I say we left it on the table. We did not accomplish what we had hoped to do in the course of the season. Only one team does, but we aspire to be that team. Are you going to go through pockets? Every organization probably goes through them where you have to step back, be very realistic. Maybe it's injuries, maybe it's cycling, whatever it is. Yeah, you probably have to go through it in professional sports, and we may. But as it stands right now, we have a really competitive group. We've been competitive. We want to remain competitive and play the right way. And that's what we're going to try and do. We think we've got building blocks both in goal and in the back end where maybe that was out of sorts for a little while. I mean, you lose a player like Zdeno, that's going to happen. There's a hole there. So it might take some time. Like you referenced in terms of filling the center, it might take some time to draft that player, to develop that player, to put him in that situation. And that's all part of what we're trying to accomplish, as an organization. And we stand here today acknowledging we fell short. And that's on me, to try and pull the right strings and hopefully make the right decisions. I guarantee you that if I'm not, somebody else will be making the decisions. That's not a problem where I stand at any point in time. And that's part of the professional sports, both as a player and in management. That's probably it's the longest summary you're going to get out of me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do you feel about the job that Bruce and the staff did this year?
We have a good coaching staff. They work really hard. They're looking for all areas of the game they can continue to improve. I think we got out of the gate a little slow. We were trying to find some traction. We had new faces. Where do they fit? The temperature's probably a little higher than you want it to be, but those guys dig in. And then all of a sudden things start to come in and now you're trying to keep it on the rails. you're always springing leaks. Nothing's going as seamlessly as you want to, and those are times where the group comes together rather than pulls apart. So I think Bruce's staff, they work hard. They try and identify the deficiencies, both at their level and also in terms of what we're trying to communicate. We might need something. We might need a push here or a different, type of player here. Lindholm's an example of that. Charlie Coyle was an example of that, and trying to find the right pieces. We all want to add, the absolute right pieces. And, at times we're doing it well, and other times we're still falling short. But as a staff, I think they attack the areas of the game. Defensively, we're not a team that gives up an awful lot. Now, we didn't score enough. Okay, our expected drop from 2.5, 2.4 to 1.6 in the playoffs. Is that a function of just playing against a really good defensive team? Well, that's what we have to figure out. Okay, we were talking about that during the course of the year in depth scoring, and then you talk about a 3-month and not a small sample size of a team that was functioning at a high level. Ultimately, that's the standard we have to hold ourselves to. Power play goes sideways. It's a function of, okay, what is it? They go to work on trying to figure out what it is. Is it, all personnel? No. Is it systematic? No. Is it execution? A lot of times. And that's the part I appreciate about our staff and their willingness to dig in, and try and find the areas of the game. We're not seamless, and we're not doing things, as well as we necessarily want or should. So we have to continue to improve overall as an organization.
When you talk about that, do you feel the need for the organization to create more young forwards to sort of alleviate some of these other problems you're talking about, whether it's cap or maybe overextending for certain age players? Is that a need for this organization, do you feel?
I think it's an imperative need for us to continue to foster creativity, and scoring is difficult in this league. Now you have to have courage, in order to go to the hard areas of the ice, and that's a hard one to convince anybody. If you don't have that internal drive, that's a really difficult process to try and create in a player. So those are things you have to identify at the earliest spot possible and bring up. But fostering the creativity and the scoring potential in players and getting to that high side is imperative for us, and maybe even more so as we're maybe transitioning out, in the next 2-3 years, players that have done that for us. So yeah, I think your point of reference of Fabian Lysell or getting Johnny Beecher or Merkeloff or whoever's the next Jack Sanika, who's sort of come into a flat line for a little bit. Now we need to get him back on an upward slope, which is what he was. And that's where your organization moves forward. It's not about just getting lucky. It's not any luck process involved in it. It's honestly identification and development. And then the player himself has to have, as I referenced, an internal engine that gets him to the point where he's capable of playing and contributing. But I think your point is well made that we're going to have to make sure we have, because the league is hard to, it's hard to score, especially at this time of the year. And, it's funny, it doesn't always translate. Regular season success and some of the things that happen don't always translate, to what's going to be successful in the playoffs. And that's a tough balance, because if you don't have those attributes in the regular season, you're not getting to the playoffs. You can't just grind yourself through and just defend every night. You can't do it. You can be a good defensive team and have success doing it, but you may still find yourself on the outside if you can't score enough. And that's part of the area of our game and the coaching staff, back to your question, that we need to continue to find a way. We don't maybe deflect enough goals. We need to make sure that we're, not just throwing pucks there for hope of rebounds, but can we create? And there's all different ways to create. You realize rush chances in the playoffs dramatically drop. In our series, they were non-existent. Okay, they executed a couple, we missed a couple. We score a really good one shorthanded, but those are the margins when you're playing really good teams.
Are you personally in a contract for next year?
I'm under contract for right now. I've had a discussion later in the year as to, the indication of where my path will be, and that will be determined in short order.
Along the lines of,
Pardon me?
along the lines of the offense, Bruce yesterday talked about possibly, different style play, scoring that, or sacrificing defense for more offense. Is that something you think should be considered, or are you more hardline, you want that defensive foundation, no matter what?
I don't think we're going to stray from a foundational standpoint. I do believe, I referenced a little earlier that I thought Carolina used their back end and the offensive blue line in particular, Slavin and D'Angelo, but even Pesce got up the ice. And that's a little more systematic where they might have a little more time. But I think our guys, we have to find a way to continue to contribute offensively from our back end. It doesn't always have to be a driving, but I do believe with Charlie and Hampus and, Grizzlick's shoulder was bad, so maybe not as effective. We have to be able to contribute in that way. It has to be a 5-man mentality. It's not just going to start from the goal line. It's great to be idealistic and say, okay, every clean breakout leads to the great transitional play through the rush, and that's what forwards want. But when the other team does what they're supposed to do, that doesn't necessarily present. So how do you create in zone? Early in the year, we weren't creating as well cycle-wise, and then we got much, much better. We got to the interior. Even watched Taylor Hall and transform his game a little bit, going to a net front and doing a pretty good job there. Those are areas that can be improved in players. And that's how you have to manufacture offense. It's not just going to be, well, let's be clean, let's execute off the rush, because that's, it may happen, which we want to be good at. And most part we are. But, if you're just a trade chance mentality and the neutral zone turnover rates go up, chances are you're going to be in your own end. So, we're trying to find the balance. Partway through the year, we all knew the depth scoring was needed to improve. And it did. It fell off maybe, at the most crucial time against a really good team. And that's on us. It's either on me to find guys that can score at a higher rate with one chance as opposed to, needing 15. But, that's a difficult exercise. So I think that they all go hand in hand in terms of fundamentally how we want to play. I don't think that necessarily needs to, but pockets of the game that we can continue to improve upon. I think that's what Bruce in our discussions and saying, okay, where do we trade this? There's going to be a trade-off. If you're hell-bent, to just try and tilt the ice all the time, you're going to trade it off somewhere. So you might want to wish your goalies luck at the start of the year if you're going to play that way.
You still in the market for the power forward type, I know you've been looking for that guy for a few years, the Ritchies with Trent right now. Are you still looking for that guy?
Well, I mean, during the playoffs, anytime you can have guys that occupy interior ice, can score there, it's only going to help your overall team. Philosophically, yeah, you'd love to have that. Whether or not you draft develop it, whether or not you acquire it, it's probably no different than trying to amass the best players in any position. But I do believe it's an area that really helps you, especially as when things get tight. And when I talk about playing against good teams, and the Islander series last year, we got dinged up, but that series got tight. Okay, when Tampa makes it hard on you, you gotta get inside, and then you got to beat a really good goalie. Like, size matters, but also we wouldn't hold Marsh to a lesser standard. And that you realize that Marsh is not very big, but he plays all the attributes of a power forward. But in the playoffs, the other team's looking to shut down the best players, and sometimes that gets leveled out and negated. Maybe as you go along in those situations, they'll always rise up. The best players always do. But when you're in certain games, I mean, I guess I'll give Max Domi a hell of a lot of credit. Like he had a hell of a game 7. That's sort of what you have to have happen. That's not a power forward, but I mean, my example is that you have to have that mentality, and we have to, that's Fabian, that's whoever's coming in our system has to understand these are what translates in the playoffs. It just does, the willingness to do it. I mean, Carolina's grown for 10 years. They've got guys that have come along and played against us. And again, I'm not going to take anything away from Carolina and how they played, but I do believe I started today in saying I think we left something on the table. And that's my job to find the tweaks and find the changes, or convince, players, coaches, development, all the above. Like that's just where it falls.
Where do things stand with Russ? His requesting your conversations with them?
I don't think things have changed other than he's happier, because his lot in life improved an awful lot, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. Okay, he went out and did perform. Maybe it's a clear headspace that he defined, not really thinking about things. Now he's, might take some time and reevaluate and realize that, like, I peeked over the neighbor's yard and the grass is not necessarily greener. My lawn's looking pretty damn good too. That's, players have their own right. We know, I've said all along, I think I know what Jake DeBrusk is capable of. Everybody would like to hold all of our guys to that standard, and to his credit, he went out and performed and played well. Okay. Everybody, I appreciate everybody's, first of all, covering the team and the organization throughout the year and their professionalism, and I wish everybody well. It's been a challenging couple of years for everybody, and health is most important for everybody. But I wish you and your families well, and we'll see you soon. All right, thank you.
Thank you.